Hi, Happy New Year, and welcome to Live with OAIB, a conversation where we discuss critical HR challenges that leaders are facing today. We use our 40 plus years of experience in HR, consulting, and executive coaching to go deep on topics that are top of mind but often avoided. Thank you so much for joining us at the top of the year. I'm Latanya Roberts, COO, executive coach, and human capital strategist. I'm a true integrator that takes a holistic approach to turn your vision for the organization or yourself into solutions that create inclusive cultures where all not only feel but know they belong and can thrive. My superpower has been my ability to keep my or help my clients clearly articulate their needs and goals and then break them down into actionable steps that do not overwhelm them. I'm joined by Tawana.
Good afternoon. Happy New Year. We are so excited to be with you in 2023. My name is Tawana Bagwa, and I'm the CEO and principal consultant for OAIB. I would say that I'm a visionary who believes in the power and promise of equity, and I help organizations become places where everyone has a deep sense of belonging. I cut through the background noise and coach individuals and groups, but especially leaders, to make a mindset shift, starting with them being their authentic selves, aligning with their purpose, and being rooted in their own personal power. I would say my superpower is helping people become aware of their blind spots so that they can put the oxygen mask on themselves and then make others feel safe, heard, and inspired. I hope we are starting this year off by putting the oxygen mask on ourselves first. So, as
Absolutely.
always, I'm excited to join Latanya today, and I think you're in for a treat for the topic that we're going to discuss.
All right, so today we're talking about gender equity. And it's not just gender equity in terms of what happens in the workplace and society, but how does that impact us in the workplace and society when it comes to pay, when it comes to how we're promoted, how we're celebrated, how we're viewed in the workplace. And this is a topic that's top of mind for a lot of people, especially right now in the new year. So, Tawana, what inspired this conversation for you?
Um, I would tell you that, like most people, people have been setting their New Year resolutions. They've been looking back over 2022 and just been saying, where am I? Where do I want to be? Am I happy? That question is being asked a lot. And I can tell you that I have been pulled into multiple conversations around feeling worth, valued, appreciated, and having that translate to reward, compensation, right? And so I decided that, you know what, I think this is a topic that we should share with our audience, just around what are they thinking, and to provide some information that will help them really take into consideration understanding their worth from a position of I've earned it, right? Versus asking. It's a posture that people have. And particularly, I've coached and watched men who walk in a room and having discussion about their compensation, and it's an expectation that they get it. It doesn't even cross their mind around approval.
I love that. A conversation about worth and it's something that we should expect because we've earned it. We're so deserving of everything that is destined for us. And I know there's a lot of ladies that are watching us right now and you've experienced some of those things, or maybe you have some questions about how you have that conversation with your boss or your supervisor next. So go ahead and drop them down in the comments and we'll be sure to answer them as we continue on here throughout this live. Tawana, why is equal pay not enough?
So before we jump into questions, I really want to give us a little background so that we're all on the same page. I believe most of you have heard of the Equal Pay Day, right? This is something that started in 1996 by the National Committee on Pay Equity. And their intent was to raise awareness of the gap between men and women pay. And this was according to the National Committee, that in 2022, the Equal Pay Day was on Tuesday, March 17th. Now, this is a symbolic day that represents, now listen closely, the number of extra days women on average must work to earn what men on average earn the year before. Not in the same year, but the year before. And for mothers and many women of color, this date falls much later in the year. So that you know there is multiple dates based on race and ethnicity. For Black women, it's August. For Latinos, it's more like September. So they are 9 months into the year before, on average, earning the same amount that a man have already earned the year before. These stats literally blew my mind. I had to keep reading them over and over, just the process, right? And as I started to do some research on this, according to the US Labor Department, for every dollar a man earns, a woman on average makes 83 cents to their dollar. The needle has not moved much since they started measuring the pay gap, which was in 1973, when women earned 56 cents for every dollar a man made. So if I do my math correctly, we're probably right around 50 years later, and we still have not closed this gap. So this is an important topic, right? Because there will be an axe of those like men of all walks of life, but white men in particular, who are paid, of course, more, or what their market value is. But I did want to add, though, because the pandemic, as we well know and have been talking about, has added another layer of complexity, right? So the pandemic has set women labor force participants back more than 30 years. This is so unfortunate because the pandemic stalled the gains made towards closing the pay gap. And the layoffs and a lack of childcare have forced many women out of the workforce entirely. So we talked about that great resignation, which I call the great stand up. And in February of 2021, women's labor force participation rate was 55.8%. This is the same rate as April of 1987. And let's not talk about women of color and those working in low wage occupations. They have been the most impacted. So when we talk about why is equity, equal pay not enough, we got to understand that there's a lot of elements that is feeding into this or at play. And so to go back to your question, I needed to just lay that as a foundation. The root of lower wage for working women is not just about gender discrimination, but also racial discrimination. The devaluation of women's work. Let's talk about the scrutiny that women are under when they're delivering next to their counterparts, who are most times men. The absence of support for essential family care, and more, right? Because most women are the primary caretaker, right? Or provider. They have to ensure that support of their children are in place in order for them to come to work. And we all want people to be productive and present. But if my child is not secure, or if I'm tending to elder or older parents, that will not have me to be present in the moment. I can't speak for others. But these are long-standing labor market structures, and COVID exposed the devastating consequences. But there's an urgent need for better solutions that support all working women. And I'm hoping to encourage some today.
Absolutely. There's so much to unpack in what you just said there, right? So you started talking about the statistics for women and men compared in the workplace. And let's be honest, the percentages that you listed were white women for the most part. When
Mhm,
you break that down by race or ethnicity, it goes
mhm.
down even further. So we started at 56% back in, what did you say, the 60s or 70s?
Yeah.
Well, for one particular race, it's there right now.
Mhm.
right? For
Yep.
Black women, it's in the 70s, Latinas in the 60s, Asian women in the 50s or 60s, right? So there's so many layers to unpack when you think about how do we get to pay equity in the workplace on
Right.
top of traditional responsibilities as caretaking. And this is not to say that men aren't caretakers. They
That's good.
absolutely are. But
Yes.
when you think about those more traditional households, it's typically the woman where that responsibility lies on. It's the woman who is expected when the pandemic broke out to take on working from home, taking care of the kids, while the
Yep.
men were just working from home from 9 to 5 and then took care of their responsibilities with the children afterwards. And we saw this with so many people who quickly left the workforce, whether it was the great stand up or it's just, I'm flat out burnt out and tired
Yes.
and I cannot take this anymore. And at the end of the day, family is going to come first, and you have to do what you need to do.
So
All right.
true.
So, Tawana, in what ways does gender inequity impact women that do decide to stay in the workplace or return to the workplace?
So listen, first of all, women are required to do more to get their equal share. And that's me talking as someone that has been in the workforce for 25 years, also a mother, a wife. And I would say we're shy of heroic, right? In what we have to do to balance the demands and then to not be paid equitably, that's an issue. And most times we never reach what we're striving out to do, but yet we're left mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually broken. And I did say broken. That would be Tawana's term. As I've talked to other women, they may not have described it that way. But in actuality, there's been a loss of life force. So I use the word broken. Some are even forced to leave or change jobs, while others get sick, experience that, burnout, which we talked about, now unfulfilled in their workplace. There's a lack of distrust, a lack of balance because we are either overcompensating to try to meet those expectations and never really still getting paid for the work that we've done compared to our counterparts, and we lose ourselves, right? Because we're chasing that dangling carrot. And sometimes people do it until they retire. There's not enough money to be earned that can replace what has been lost. And that is ourselves in most cases.
Wow. So when we think about going even deeper, right? Like a lot of us women, we have those same challenges. But specifically when we talk about women of color, how does gender equity have a deeper effect on women of color?
Yeah, this one hits a nerve for me because it feels like a tax or a toll, right? When you are a woman of color, I am a woman of color having experienced these things because it's not just about pay. And this is not just for women of color, right? But it's more prevailing, right? It's about value, it's about your worth, it's about having respect, it's about equity, access, and opportunity. These things are granted to men. You show up, you met the job requirements or not. We're at January
Yeah.
2023. I'm
We
going
can say that. You can say or
right.
not.
I'm going there,
Yeah.
right? Granted to men, and particularly white men, but must be earned by women, especially women of color. And so when you think about what we have to do to earn it, here is where the inequities begin to creep in, right? Here is where this impact on your family, on relationships, on your mental, it is a tax and a toll that no one can give back to you because it shows up as a loss. It oftentimes feel like there's something that has been taken from you, and then there's an expectation that you have to adjust in order to win, in order to stay in the game. And that's where the say injustice, right? I would say that's where the unfairness kicks in. And then on top of that, you still not meet your full potential because of the glass ceiling. And where is the motivation when there's no compensation?
Mm. God, this is so good. I'm so glad we're talking about this at the beginning of the year. And you mentioned earlier that women, we're superheroes, right? We walk around with this
Yeah,
invisible S on our chest and we
love
do
it.
all things, right? We do hard things well.
But don't forget the cape.
We do that every day. We show up and show out. But that also requires us to be a active participant in our own rescue,
Yeah,
otherwise known as advocacy, right?
yeah,
Be our own advocate. So how should women leaders advocate for themselves and other women in the workplace?
yeah. This is so important. So, women, hear me and hear me clearly. You have to first understand your worth and then be okay with asking for it. Worst case scenario, you get no. That's not devastating. It's a validation of what you already knew. So accept and then decide what's next. That is not me encouraging anyone to just quit your job. We have responsibilities. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying first understand your worth and then ask. If worst case scenario is that you get a no, then you begin to plan what's next to help me get a yes. Because at the end of the day, we want to be in a conversation of not why, but why not, right? That's a
Yes.
different mindset to be in. Then we have to have open and honest conversations with our managers about your personal goals and what growth opportunities are available for you to bring those personal goals to life, right? And that's fine. Again, that you may not hear what you want to hear, but at least you're not spending time guessing, right? Then inquire and understand the true pay scale and wages within your organization. Most times we're not educated on it. And to be quite honest, it's intended to be vague or complicated to deter you from digging into it. But I'm going to talk about a solution in a few minutes around that in particular. Now, as we talk about other women that have gone before us, that have paved the way, that are shoulders that we stand on, we also have to put a challenge on you to reach back, right? To clear a pathway for people to be able to walk through. And that's also done through getting or becoming a mentor or sponsor for other women that have potential or that you need to coach. I was going to say tutor, coach to, move in a direction that will have them to be rewarded. Most importantly, be the voice that amplifies other women and their work, right? There is so much greatness within the community called women as a whole. And it will take other women to say that, are they being paid? Ask the question. This work deserves a promotion, right? What's the plan for this person? Where do you see them going in the next 2 years? Just probing to expand the thinking of those that are in a position of authority to be able to make a decision or influence. But at the end of the day, we got to do some work on those processes and systems.
That's right. So, talking about the work on the processes and systems, that responsibility lies at the organizational level. We
Absolutely.
started talking about self. We started talking about how do you work with your team or those that you're advocating for. So, let's talk
Mhm.
about what the organization can do to actually help to achieve pay equity.
Now, I would tell you when I said that we're, according to, the U.S. Department of Labor, we're at 83% women grouped together, okay, compared to the dollar that a man makes. So one can say clearly there's been a lot of work done, but we have a lot more work to do, right? But in order to level the playing field for women, one is we got to increase pay transparency around wages across the board. No one should be in your organization and not understand how wages works in the organization at the different levels, right? We got to disrupt occupational segregation because we tend to, and as an HR professional, I participated in it, okay? Where we create job descriptions, we look at the market, we assess where we are, what we can pay, right? And all of that is fine. But then we do, tenure, seniority, we start to layer and complicate so that it makes it difficult. And you and I both know everyone can't be paid the same amount, right? Because we are paid per performance. Most companies are a pay per performance. So everyone is not performing at the same level. But let's not use it as a divisive tool. That's the difference. Whether it should be something that's incentivizing and motivating people to want to do their best, right? Then we got to expand paid family and medical leave. We have to do something around that. The FMLA system, it works. It's 6 weeks. It's a time limit. It's rolling. It's all these things. But you and I both know, as we've all experienced COVID, right? And now you got a COVID fog, right? I mean, all these layers of what that looks like. It's normally 5 days, now it's 3 days, but we're not healing that fast. There's so much more that we're processing. Expanding access to paid leave for child and elder care. We haven't talked much in our community about elder care. But as we are looking at the four generations that are working in the workforce today, the baby boomers are now retiring and the other generations are taking care. Gen X is taking care of their parents. So it's not just that we got to look for care for our babies, our children, our teens. We also now have to take care of and provide support to the elders. And then I would say stop basing employee pay on salary history. That's a tricky one. And all I would say about that, just so that we can move on, is that when we look at history of anything, it should be used as a guide, right? But not necessarily the standard or the measure. And then last, I would say improve work life balance. With COVID, we've crossed the line, right? In between meetings, we're washing clothes, we're having prayer, we're changing the baby diapers, we're doing all those things. So the lines are so blurred that you no longer can do, I'll say, as they would say, separation of state and church in your own home, right? So let alone, so you're on constantly, constantly. And that's why we talk so much about the burnout because it's important and it's real. Let me stop.
Absolutely. Now, we can go on and on about that topic. When you said stop basing employee pay on salary history, I
Yeah,
raised my hand because that just repeats the cycle.
correct.
If you left your job because you were underpaid,
Yeah,
why would you want that going in as a baseline to the new job when you know you are worth so much more?
yeah,
So I won't get on my soapbox on that one, but we could talk, and I have stories for days on that.
right.
Now, women, we do a great job of compartmentalizing, right? We can say, okay, you know what? What's the fire that I need to put out right now? I'm gonna focus on that, and I'm
Mhm.
gonna put everything over here in another box. But let's break that down a bit further, Miss Master Life Coach.
Ah,
What?
let me tell you, you could call me a master coach of compartmentalizing because I've
Okay.
done that.
Why, in your experience, what have the people said to you? Why do they compartmentalize? Let break down, because that's a habit, right? Let's break that
Yeah.
habit down, and why do we actually do that?
Such a great question. And if you were to ask me this 10 years ago, I'm like, that's how we get through. So it truly is a way to cope, right? It's a way to process, to put things into perspective, and particularly from your experience of trying to survive. Most times, when you are in a place where you are the victim of inequities, we want to put a thing in its proper place so it doesn't cross over to other things, right? So I'm like, this is work. Here's the box. This is the rest of my life, right? So I'm just going to keep the crazy in this box so that I can. And I would tell you that it crosses over. It also, it takes so much from you that you're out of alignment and you struggle to accept the current reality, your current reality. So, as a coping mechanism, it's a protection and it has a lifespan. And to be clear, it's pretty short. So I would just say, remember there's only one of you. I don't care how much we try to put ourselves into boxes. Now we are multi-dimensional and infinite, right? But I would say I would invite you to consider that this is a practice, right? That may be for a finite amount of time, right? But in essence, it should not be a normal practice. Why? Because it gets in the way of you being your authentic self. Because you go into that box, this is what's acceptable. This is how we should do it. This is how I should act. This is when I should do it, right? And then you try to switch when you get into the other boxes and you forget to turn the switch on and off. So it's so important. And if this is truly about bringing your whole self to the workplace, if you can't bring your whole self to work, maybe that is not the place for you. Maybe that's not the place for you.
It's always an option.
I'm just saying,
Mhm.
something to consider.
Absolutely. Now, some people may think that this really only impacts when we talk about pay equity and gender equity. This only impacts some of the more junior levels in the workplace. But Tawana, you were a VP of HR. And I know that you can attest to the fact it happens at all levels. And and I know we're running out of time. We said 30 minutes, y'all. Just give us a couple more minutes now. We were developing a new training, and you spoke about a specific scenario that I think the people need to hear about where you experienced gender equity in the workplace. Do you mind quickly sharing what that
And I
story?
would say gender inequity. So really quick, I worked with majority white men, and I was rushing to a meeting and I was late going to the meeting. And I noticed the door was locked, which is odd. We don't lock doors in work, but the door was locked. So I figured something was wrong there. I knocked on the door they unlocked the door, but it didn't open. When I opened it, they had a trash can in front of it. So when I opened it, the trash can fell over and it just made such a loud noise and it was so disruptive, right? And so I'm picking up the trash to try to get to my seat. And one of the men commented that that's where women belong, cleaning up. I was so taken back, right? I felt belittled. I felt actually betrayed. Um,
Mhm.
I felt unwanted, humiliated. I was pissed. I was pissed and pretty fed up. So, that wasn't the beginning. So,
Mhm.
there's history there, right? And it has such an impact on how I showed up because I checked out at that point. I
Mhm.
had to reevaluate, was this the right place for me? I stopped trusting people, especially white men, right? My performance, I would say, went down. I did the bare minimum to just get by. I was not present or in the moment at all. It actually, as I mentioned earlier, took life force from me. And I had to decide if this was the right place for me. And if I'm really telling you the state that I was in, I was actually expecting at that time. So there was an emotional toll of, I'm so tired physically, right? And still having to deal with the challenges that we deal with as women, and my work not being valued. And then to come into an environment that had me to feel psychologically unsafe, I had to make some decisions. And I did decide to exit the company, but
Mhm.
I had sponsors and mentors that rallied around me and came to support me in a way that got me out of that environment. And I'm so thankful that there was someone there to amplify me, my work, my voice, and to help support and navigate me through that situation. So I started out by saying mentoring and sponsorship is so critical for so many reasons.
Thank you for sharing that story again. I still get frustrated every time I hear it
Yeah,
because that's just one of those little microaggressions that people like,
absolutely.
oh, it's funny, but it has such a huge impact. And it causes people to leave the workforce. It causes people to not trust people. And some people never recover from that. And thank goodness you did, because
Yes,
you wouldn't be in the
it's one of
position
my
you're in now.
motivators. I
That's
am here today to make sure it does not happen to anyone under my watch.
That's right. That's right. And it's those stories like that are why we do what we do at OAIB,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So let's go ahead and wrap this up. Let the people know, how can OAIB help executives and organizations work to establish gender equity within their organization?
Well, we do so much, but we come in and assess your current processes, policies, and practices, and particularly around the gender equity piece. We really do a deep dive into your compensation analysis, right? And then we break that up by demographics, by race, by levels, by age. And we're always looking at anything that we do with an equity lens. And then we talk about, how does that compare against the market? What does your history look like? We also interview stakeholders because we want to understand where their mindset is. Those that will be receiving the benefit and those that are in um, high in the organization, that are decision makers, that can make a difference, that want to make a difference. I will tell you what we don't do, and we don't do work where it's check the box. That's for sure.
That's right. So just like today, we are going there in this conversation. We definitely go there with our clients because that's how you really make transformational change,
Absolutely.
not about the transactions.
That's right.
Anyone can do that. If you want real change in your organization and you're serious, you definitely want to get in touch with us. And you can do that by going to www.oaib.org. Again, that's oaib.org. We would love to hear from you. If you got anything from today's conversation, please go ahead and show us a little love in the comments. Drop a question in there as well. We want to hear from you. What else is on your mind? What other topics do you want to discuss as we come on these lives every first and third Tuesday? The first Tuesday, we do 30 minutes. The third Tuesday, we go for a whole hour, and you can actually receive SPHR credits from SHRM to continue those continuing education credits. Please join us next time. Thank you so much for listening, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you.